Okay, we're in Acts 26 still. And Paul he's pretty much given the full download, though not deeply theological. He told his story and gave Festus the basic content of the message he had been preaching. The last part is that God would bring the message of light to his own people and to the Gentiles. That's the end of verse 23. 24. At this point, Festus interrupted Paul's defense. It's a unique defense in that it's as I'm reading it, and I know this is because of my I guess it would be my bias, but it's more of a biographical testimony than it is a defense. But anyway, Festus interrupted Paul's defense. "You're out of your mind, Paul," he shouted. "Your great learning is driving you insane." Well, that's not a very dignified thing for the judge of a case to say. Verse 25, "I'm not insane, most excellent Festus," Paul replied. "What I'm saying is true and reasonable. The king is familiar with these things, and I can speak freely to him. I'm convinced that none of this has escaped your notice because it was done. It was not done in a corner. King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? I know you do." This is Paul. This is vintage Paul. We'll go on. Verse 28. "Then Agrippa said to Paul, 'Do you think that in such a short time you can persuade me to be a Christian?'" Oh, there's that term. Hasn't been used very much. I'm thinking this is like maybe only the second or third time in Luke's narrative that the term is used. But because Festus used that term, I think we can draw from that a fact an inference. Felix was not uninformed about this new movement. He was well enough informed to call it by the name that it was being called by. But see, Felix was not very much different than lots of people that you and I encounter today. I don't think he was, I don't know how to exactly, he wasn't antagonistic necessarily. Well, yeah, he kind of was now that I think about it. When he's calling Paul insane, he was definitely resistant. Do you think in such a short time you can persuade me to be a Christian? So now, there's another thing I think is in there, is that Festus realized, this has moved from being the defense to now he's sermonizing and making an attempt to convert me. Paul replied, "Short time or long, I pray to God that not only you, but all who are listening to me today may become what I am, except for these chains." Paul was a driven individual. Now, there are a lot of things about being driven that have negative potential, quite negative, in fact, in my opinion. If I am driven in the negative sense, I have tunnel vision. And if you're going to pursue a goal, That is one way to do it. And one of the problems with being tunnel visioned is you don't see anything or anybody else. All you see is the objective or the goal and your plan to get there. If anybody gets in the way of that plan or somehow keeps you from pursuing that plan, they become an enemy. That's a pretty strong word, but they're at least an enemy of your goal. And for most people with that kind of driven tunnel vision, if I get in their way, I become their personal enemy. Stay out of my way. Know anybody like that? Now, there's other people who are driven, but not as maniacal. They're not as mean and rude about it. When I was young in youth ministry, I was pretty driven. I was driven by 2 or 3 things, really. It wasn't like a big number. One, the big one is I wanted to be noticed as the awesome youth guy in wherever I lived, in Oklahoma City or Tulsa. I wanted to have a big group. I wanted to be asked to talk and speak and, do things at youth leaders conventions. I wanted to be on the map. Well, that's not a really good motivation. But it drove me where I kind of lost sight of other things that honestly are far more important. I think I've shared this before, that my shadow mission was, and probably not even probably, it still is, though I'm trying to put it behind me, mortify it, is I want to be at the cool kids table. I want to be noticed, recognized, esteemed. That's not necessarily evil, but it can lead to some really not good things. Well, to be driven it depends on, I guess, what you're driven to and what you're driven by. Paul was driven by this consuming desire to see people find Jesus and find life in him. If more people in the church, I'm going to throw a rock, including me, were driven by that desire, if that was our motivating driver, that I want people to know Jesus, to know his peace, to know his presence. If that was my primary driver, it would change probably a lot about my life, my lifestyle, what I do and what I don't do. Now, if that was a primary driver for me, I would execute on it, I think, differently than Paul. I don't think Paul had much of an extroversion inclination. I think he was an introversion inclination. I think he was an extrovert. I think he found people and people found him. And he was bold and outspoken, though I don't perceive him, and again, I know I'm biased, but as I'm reading his story, I'm not thinking, well, that's stupid, or that had to be just really awkward. He was a very well-read man who engaged with people on terms that the people would get. But I am more introverted. I tend to do better utilizing relationship and friendship. This does not excuse me from seizing opportunity to talk about Jesus, but it will shape how I do that. Bottom line, Paul, if Christians, all Christians, regardless of their spiritual gifts, their temperament, their introversion or extroversion, regardless, if all of us were driven by this passion to see other people find Jesus, wow. I think it's safe to say the world would not be as it is today. Here is an aspect of this potential scenario in all of our lives is if I'm going to have that kind of passion, if I'm going to be driven in that way, there are other things that have to go away. They have to be pushed aside. Well, one of the drivers in my life is a desire to be happy and comfortable. I hate it. That is a humiliating confession. It's embarrassing to me because I view that as an immature motivation. To be happy? To be comfortable? Okay, part of God's design for my life is joy. It's the second of the fruit of the Spirit. Love is number one. Joy comes right behind it. But there's a difference between joy and happiness. When I have joy, probably in most cases, happiness will also coexist there, right? But there are times when happiness, I can be happy, and joy not be very strong in that. But see, happiness is about the happening, right? Joy is a sense from deep within me. And for the Christian, this is the result of the Holy Spirit working in my life and heart so that in difficult, challenging, sorrowful circumstances, joy and sorrow can coexist. All right. Happiness. It's not wrong to be happy. It's not wrong even probably to want to be happy. But if I build my life around the passion of being happy, that's not, there's just no future in that. It can't be sustained. Paul, obviously, when you look at his life, he did not pursue happiness. When it came, he accepted it and enjoyed it. But he was not held hostage by this passion to be happy and comfortable. I think if Christians today, including, I'd be at the front of the line on this, if I want the passion of my life to help people find Jesus, if that's what it's going to be for me, I'm going to have to turn loose of this passion for happiness and comfort. One last thing. I have to give up always wanting my way. What I've got to then choose instead is God's way. And Paul's life is, he's stellar on so many levels, but on this level, he's a great challenging example for me of giving up his will so that he can embrace God's will. Well, maybe there's something in that for all of us. I'll see you next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.